A man entered, handed me a receipt, and said, "You'll need this later." The automatic doors sighed shut behind him, dragging a ribbon of cold night air across the linoleum. It smelled like gasoline soaked into concrete and the citrus bite of cleaning fluid that never quite erased the past. The lights above aisle 3 flickered, a slow, irregular blink that made the rows of chips and candy bars seem to stutter in place. Somewhere behind me, the refrigeration units hummed like a distant engine idling, steady and patient. It was 2:17 a.m., the hour when even the highway seemed to hold its breath. No cars passed the windows. No insects tapped the glass. Just the hum, the flicker, and the soft whisper of receipts curling in the trash can near the register. I hadn't heard the man come in. One moment I was counting change, aligning coins into neat stacks the way my manager liked, and the next there was a presence in front of me. Close enough that I could smell damp wool and something older beneath it, like paper left too long in a basement. He wore a coat that didn't belong to this decade. Thick, dark, with a collar turned up as if against a colder world than the one outside. His face was ordinary in the way that made it hard to remember. Pale, clean-shaven, eyes the color of cloudy ice. He didn't look at the shelves or the cooler or the lottery display. He looked only at me. He placed the receipt on the counter with 2 fingers, careful, reverent. The paper was warm. "You'll need this later," he said. His voice was calm, almost kind. Then he turned and walked back through the doors. They opened for him without a chime, swallowing him in a breath of cold fog, and closed again. The night outside returned to stillness. For a long second I didn't move. The store felt bigger after he left, stretched thin, like the space between notes in a song. The hum of the refrigerators grew louder. The lights flickered twice in quick succession. I picked up the receipt. The thermal paper was fresh, the ink dark and sharp. At the top was the store's name and address, printed exactly as it always was. Below that, a timestamp, 3:41 a.m., November 19th, 2038. I checked the register clock. 2:17 a.m. The date, August 12th, 2026. My mouth tasted like metal. I flipped the receipt over, then back again, as if the numbers might rearrange themselves under scrutiny. They didn't. There were items listed, but they weren't things we sold. Passage $0. Weight $0. Return non-refundable. At the bottom, where there was usually a cheery thank you message, it read, "Keep this receipt. No exceptions." A line of numbers followed, longer than any transaction code I'd seen, looping almost off the edge of the paper. My name was printed beneath it. I hadn't told him my name. I told myself it was a prank. A messed up printer. Exhaustion. The receipt smelled wrong. Too old, like dust and skin oils and the faint sweetness of decaying paper. I slid it into the drawer beneath the register, under the spare receipt rolls, and forced myself to breathe. The rest of the shift dragged. Every time the doors opened for a late-night regular, my shoulders jumped. The receipt drawer felt heavier, as if it contained more than paper. At 3:41 a.m., the lights flickered again, and for a heartbeat the hum of the refrigerators dipped, like a held breath. Nothing else happened. I went home at dawn with the receipt folded in my pocket, though I didn't remember putting it there. Sleep didn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the ink bleeding through the paper, the future date glowing faintly, insistent. When morning finally broke, I dug out an old laptop and searched the store's address along with the word disappearance. There were more results than there should have been. Over the years, clerks, attendants, and overnight managers had vanished. Some simply stopped showing up. Others were reported missing after their shifts, their cars found abandoned in the lot, doors unlocked, keys still in the ignition. A few articles mentioned receipts, found in pockets, wallets, clutched in hands. The photos were grainy, but I recognized the layout, the font. Different dates, different items, always the same line at the bottom. I drove back to the store before my next shift, standing in the parking lot in daylight. The place looked smaller, harmless, a gas station like any other. The automatic doors breathed cold air as customers came and went. I almost convinced myself it had been a dream. Inside, I asked the morning clerk, Mara, if she'd ever heard of anyone disappearing from the store. She frowned. Why would you ask that? I showed her the receipt. She didn't read it. She went pale the instant she saw the paper. Where did you get that? She whispered. A man gave it to me last night. Mara backed away, bumping into the coffee machine. You shouldn't have taken it. What is it? She shook her head, eyes darting to the doors. They don't let you say. Not before. Before what? Before it's time. She quit that afternoon. The next weeks were a blur of research and dread. I found forums buried deep online, threads that ended abruptly, usernames that went dark mid-sentence. People talked about late-night stores, lonely stations, places where time pooled thin and strange. They talked about receipts as warnings, as tickets, as proof that a choice had already been made. Some said the receipts were mercy. I started noticing gaps, minutes missing from my memory. The receipt would appear on my nightstand when I was sure I'd left it in my wallet. Once, I found a faint burn mark on the counter shaped exactly like the edge of thermal paper. On the night printed on the receipt, November 19, 2038, I was still working there. Older, tired, pretending the future was something you could outrun by staying busy. At 3:41 a.m., the lights flickered. The refrigerators hummed. The doors opened without a sound. I knew what was coming. When the man stepped inside, he looked exactly the same. When I tried to speak, my voice stuck in my throat. He held out the receipt, warm as a living thing. You'll need this later, he said. I understood then with a clarity that hurt. The receipt wasn't for me. It was from me. A closed loop of warning and inevitability. The items listed weren't purchases. They were stages. Passage. Wait. Return. As he turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of his face reflected in the glass of the cooler door. The angle was wrong, the features too familiar. It was mine. The last thing I remembered was reaching for the receipt, my fingers brushing the ink, already smudged where I'd held it before. When the doors closed, the store was quiet again, and somewhere in the future or the past, I had already used it. The store's air grew thick, like breathing through cloth. At first I thought it was the heat. The old general store had never handled summer nights well, even with the single rattling AC unit mounted above the soda cooler. By midnight it usually surrendered, pushing out a tired breath that smelled faintly of dust and old cardboard. But this was different. This was pressure. Each inhale dragged, as if the air had weight, as if it resisted being taken. The bell above the door had gone silent hours ago. Outside, the highway lay empty, a dark ribbon beyond the windows, the parking lot lights buzzing with a weak, insect hum. Inside, the fluorescents cast a sickly yellow-white glow that flattened everything. Shelves, counters, my own hands, into something pale and unreal. They flickered just often enough to make me notice, not enough to break. I stood behind the counter, fingers resting on the worn wood, feeling the vibration of the refrigeration units through my palms. The sound was constant, a low, chest-deep hum, like something breathing beneath the floor. It usually comforted me, proof that the building was awake, working. Now it felt like the store was listening. The air thickened another degree. My chest tightened. I swallowed and tasted dust, old paper, the lemon sting of cleaning solution that never quite masked the smell of age. The aisles stretched ahead of me in narrow lanes, shelves tall and close, stacked with cans whose labels had faded into near-identical reds and yellows. The farther aisles were dimmer, the lights above them buzzing more aggressively, as if irritated. I checked my watch. 12:34 a.m. The time meant nothing, but I needed something solid to hold on to. When I stepped out from behind the counter, the floor creaked in a way it hadn't earlier. The sound seemed to linger, stretching, echoing longer than it should have in such a small space. I paused, listening. The hum dipped, then resumed slightly lower. "Hello," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. No answer. The windows reflected only me and the lights behind me. No cars passed. No wind moved the faded posters taped to the glass. As I walked the center aisle, the shelves felt closer than before. I brushed my shoulder against a rack of chip bags and they rustled softly, not like plastic, but like paper being handled carefully. I pulled my arm away and the sound stopped. The air pressed in. Breathing felt like pulling oxygen through layers of fabric. Manageable but wrong. I became acutely aware of each inhale, each exhale, the way my lungs had to work harder than they should. Halfway down the aisle, I noticed the lights ahead were dimmer. Not out, just less. As if the store had decided that end didn't need as much illumination. The shadows there looked thicker, pooled around the base of the shelves. I took another step. The floor did not creak this time. The hum changed pitch. I turned back toward the counter, intending to retreat, to sit down, to wait this out. The counter seemed farther away than it had moments ago. The aisles to either side looked longer, their ends obscured by a faint haze that hadn't been there before. My pulse thudded in my ears. I told myself it was panic, that claustrophobia did strange things to perception. The store was the same size it had always been. The walls hadn't moved. Still, when I took a step backward, my heel bumped into a shelf that should not have been there. I spun. Another aisle had slid into place behind me, stocked with identical rows of canned soup. The labels were all facing forward, perfectly aligned. They hadn't been there before. I was certain of it. The cans whispered. It was subtle, so quiet I almost missed it. A dry, papery sound, like someone rubbing their thumb across newsprint. It rose and fell, synchronized with the hum beneath the floor. "Stop," I said, though I didn't know who or what I was addressing. The whispering ceased. The lights flickered once, hard. For a fraction of a second, the store was dark. In that instant, something shifted. I felt it more than saw it, a rearranging, a tightening. When the lights returned, the ceiling seemed lower, the aisles narrower, the air heavier still. Sweat prickled along my spine. I tried the door. It did not open. The automatic mechanism whined softly, confused, as if the door no longer understood its purpose. Cold air did not rush in. The outside remained distant, unreachable, a flat image behind glass. I leaned my forehead against the door and inhaled. The cloth-thick air resisted me. My breath came shallow now. Behind me, the hum deepened, resonating through my bones. The shelves creaked. Somewhere in the back, something slid across the floor with deliberate slowness. I didn't turn around. The store felt smaller with every breath, as if it were contracting around me, curious, testing. The lights dimmed incrementally, aisle by aisle, leaving only the immediate area around me illuminated. Beyond that, the shadows pressed close, dense and expectant. The whispering returned, closer now. Not words, intent. Tension. I realized then that the store had always been like this. Not alive in any way I understood, but aware. Responsive. It knew the rhythm of footsteps, the weight of bodies, the sound of breathing. It had learned patience from years of waiting. I had been alone long enough for it to notice. My vision tunneled. The hum became a roar. The shelves leaned inward, just slightly, enough to be undeniable. I stepped back, then another, until my shoulders brushed metal and cardboard on both sides. The store inhaled. I don't remember falling, only the sensation of being held, pressed, contained. The air grew impossibly thick, utterly inescapable. When the morning clerk arrived, the door opened easily for them. The lights were steady. The hum was normal. They would later say the store felt smaller than usual, more closed in. And somewhere between the aisles, the air waited, already learning the shape of its next breath.